Hey, folks, this podcast is brought to you by Parlay Play Fantasy Sports. Use my referral code RotoBrady. Get that sweet, sweet deposit bonus. They got paid contests coming to a state near you. They're giving out boosts and bonuses, slashing lines all day long. Hop in those player prop DFS contests. It's a real fun platform over there. Um, Folks, you can follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady. Now, combat sports really starting to amp up for the year 2026. Find my picks on Twitter at RotoBrady. Also, follow me on Instagram, RotoBrady MMA. Follow the podcast at Tap That MMA Podcast on YouTube. Come out to the Rotoballer MMA Discord on Saturday. Be popping in and out of there all day. Let's talk about what you're doing betting wise and DFS wise for UFC 324. And look up for my MMA DFS values picks article coming out. That always comes out on Friday mornings / afternoons on Rotoballer. And folks, this is going to be the last episode of Tab that comes through Rotoballer. After this, every UFC picks episode, every interlude episode, that's going to be independently published by me on YouTube and through, my own Spotify. You'll still be able to find it at Tap That MMA Podcast. Same YouTube location. I will let it be known what, specific location. You can find it on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, as soon as we start publishing those episodes independently. It's an exciting new chapter for Tap That. It's going to make a little bit more sense moving forward. And I'm going to make a great effort here in 2026 to expand the things I'm doing on YouTube, whether it's YouTube Shorts, just more YouTube content in general, live streams, as much expansion as I possibly can now that this is going to be an independent venture. And what is up, everybody? This is Brady Grove bringing you episode 199 of Rotoballer's official MMA podcast, Tap That. And we've got UFC 324, the first UFC event of 2026 and the first one of the new Paramount Plus era on Saturday.
I want to tell me what you see. Let's go ahead and see by the fight what you saw in the ring.
And, we had to have him on for this one. Frequent guest co-host of this podcast. Give it up for Connor Bones Slone. Connor, how's it going tonight?
It's going good. I can't tell you how excited I am to have the UFC back. I can't tell you how more excited I am to have UFC on Paramount. I no longer have to deal with those bullshit ESPN streams where the not so legal streams somehow worked better than the ESPN streams. Already pay for Paramount. They have a few good shows, Star Trek being the number one. So this is just a win-win overall. Get the UFC back. I don't have to pay a cent more to watch every card from here on out. I'm pumped.
And it's already a weird vibe to combat sports in 2026. One, this is going to be uncharted territory for the UFC, moving away from the pay-per-view model. The UFC library will be on Paramount. I wonder what it'll do for viewership. I wonder what it'll do for the amount of money that the athletes are able to make. And then Don Davis just stepped down from PFL as the chairman of PFL. That's probably for the best. A guy who admittedly does not watch mixed martial arts, likened it to doctors don't watch doctor shows. This isn't an MMA show, Don. This is the sport of mixed martial arts. It's not a fictionalized version of it. It's hard to be a committed head of something that you don't care about. What a weird thing. And a lot of stuff about PFL in hindsight makes a lot more sense now. So that's happening with PFL. And then Zuffa Boxing. First event, Connor, is going to be tomorrow. By this point, it'll be today, Friday, I believe at 5:30 p.m. on Paramount Plus. The main event's going to be Callum Walsh. And they just signed Jai Opatai. And there's talks that they might be close to signing Alexander Usyk. And Dana White is, bending a little on his thing about, not fighting for belts and not working with other promoters because, he had the opportunity to sign that one and possibly those two guys. So between those few items, what do you make of the current landscape of combat sports?
Yeah, well, to be honest, I've tried to get into boxing a few times. I will watch it on occasion when there's a fight that I think is particularly interesting, but it's definitely not something I follow as closely as I follow MMA. Honestly, I very much wish that instead of investing in boxing and especially slap fighting, it's totally a disgrace that the UFC has even associated themselves with slap fighting. It would have been way more interesting to me if they took the route of one championship and invested in Muay Thai, because I'll tell you what, those Muay Thai fights in one are some of the best entertainment you'll ever see. Highly recommend, if that's not something on your radar, you go watch that. Truly, it's just those guys just come to brawl. So I would have loved to see that. I'll keep an eye on Zuffa Boxing, especially if they continue to sign impressive talent. I mean, them signing Usyk would be very significant. Callum Walsh, that sounds like an interesting fight. So I'll definitely check it out. But I would have much preferred to see more investment in Muay Thai. I think that's going to fare very well for one championship. I think they have established themselves as a very solid number two to the UFC, and I expect to see them continue to grow as the PFL. If they continue to make kind of poor decisions as they have, I don't see them getting much bigger. I see more attention transitioning to one, but who knows? Maybe PFL will turn things around. But that's kind of what I see. I see 2026, especially. It's going to be a short year. I see the UFC remaining dominant. I think one championship will gain more viewership, especially since they're on Amazon Prime. It's super easy to watch. So that's really what's on my radar this year for MMA. UFC and one are I think they're going to be dominating my viewership.
It's so weird because LFA and some other premier, feeder promotions aren't going to be on UFC Fight Pass anymore. They have, they've cut ties there, and there's going to be new promotions that are going to be on UFC Fight Pass. LFA now is going to be on Vice. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, questionable move, I would say, from them. It's like when the Indoor Football League went from putting their games live and free on YouTube to going to their like IFL network online. You had to pay like $70 for the year or whatever it was. And I'm like, dude, I watched every game of yours of the season. Now there's two other indoor/arena football leagues that I'm gonna watch now because I'm not gonna pay for another subscription for this. I was watching every game, and now you told me to pay for it. It's almost like you told me you either didn't appreciate me watching or you don't want me to watch anymore.
Yeah, that's really interesting comparison. And to me, I don't know the financial details of how much the UFC gets from what streams of revenue, but to me, it almost seems like the most successful organizations long term are going to be the ones that make it easy and affordable for their fans to watch. That's exactly why I think moving to Paramount was a really smart move for the UFC. You can pay $12 a month, watch everything. I think that's going to increase their viewer counts, which is going to translate into more sponsor money, which I think is where they're going to make the most of their money. Like, who cares about pay-per-view buys? I think sponsors will pay much more than the public is willing to pay when it comes to pay-per-views. So I think one and UFC have positioned themselves well. And yeah, it's interesting. I didn't know that the Indoor Football League, Arena Football League did that, but yeah, that was fun when it was going on. So I would imagine being pissed having to pay $70 a year to watch it when you could watch it for free. That just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, because there's the IFL, the Indoor Football League. Then there's the AF1. That was the original like Arena Football League. There's other ones, and it's like, dude, they're putting their games free on YouTube. Like, I'm gonna watch that. I struggled to make the time to watch stuff that is that niche, and so if I'm struggling to watch it, like struggling to carve out the time, I'm definitely not going to invest money in it. That when I already have several niche sports subscriptions, like Ryzen Premium, for instance. Shout out Ryzen for a great New Year's Eve event. Um, and my last kind of thing on this is it makes the power slap thing so much weirder in hindsight.
I want to tell me what you see. Let's go ahead and see by the fight what you saw in the ring?
Because so the UFC invests a lot in the grappling and the all the big jiu-jitsu tournaments and stuff. Cool, that there's definitely a market for that. It's definitely not, I think, what people were asking for the most, but cool. That's on. Then Power Slap comes along as a separate Dana White venture. And in the meantime, BKFC was growing and thriving, several bare knuckle organizations. There's all the Muay Thai and kickboxing organizations in the world. Karate Combat, possibly RIP to that group if they aren't paying people, as it seems they aren't. That is the way that every great, memorable combat sports promotion goes, is not paying people. And so Karate Combat, then Dirty Boxing, a fantastic and unique and exciting idea that attracts big names. And now look at RAF, the wrestling promotion, that in one day on Fox Nation, it resulted in the largest day of subscription growth in Fox Nation history when they opened it up for the RAF. So you see all these niche combat sports promotions and ideas popping up, and it's like, dude, all of that, and you came up with and put your full weight behind Power Slap?
It just makes absolutely no sense. I think, honestly, what I think it was, there were a few videos of Power Slap that went viral on TikTok. Dana White said, "Oh, look, it's going viral." He saw dollar signs and he was like, "Oh, this is the perfect format for TikTok. This is what the youngins do. This is what the children do these days. Let's invest in it." So I don't know. He's a bonehead. Hopefully it goes away eventually. I just have no desire to watch Power Slap whatsoever.
Dude, like, you could have brought street beefs to a higher platform. Dude, if you did professional sumo with American dudes, I think it would be a way better idea than that. There's so many better ideas than Power Slap. It's like he lost a bet, or it was like some sort of deal to join the Illuminati, like that he had for a couple years. He had to put his weight behind it, and then the Illuminati would make him a major boxing promoter.
Well, you know what the joke was for a while that now is seeming like it may actually have some weight behind it is, remember when Dana's wife slapped him and then he slapped her back? There was a whole conspiracy at the time that, oh, Dana White invested in Power Slap. So when you Google Dana White slap, him slapping his wife isn't the first thing that comes up. So I don't know. Maybe there's something to that.
That's a lot of money to spend on that, though. A lot of money and time, and like a lot of time on camera being like, no, man, this is perfectly legit. Like, all for Google? Like, why don't I just pay Google? I don't know, but it's possible. So we've got 13 fights left on the slate for UFC 324. Unfortunately, we lost the Amanda Nunes and Kayla Harrison fight. Kayla Harrison ended up having a neck injury. Unfortunate. And I hope they get that booked again as soon as possible.
They better rebook that. That's the most exciting women's fight I can think of right now.
Dude, what they should do, honestly, is do a trilogy, no matter what. Amanda Nunes versus Kayla Harrison for the UFC Women's Bantamweight belt. Next fight, Amanda Nunes versus Kayla Harrison for the UFC Women's Featherweight belt. Next fight, Kayla Harrison, Amanda Nunes for the inaugural UFC Women's Lightweight belt. The weights that each of them have dabbled in, and then also one that would be outside of their comfort zone. It touches a little bit of everything. But this is a stacked card. There's a lot of great action here. I certainly have some questions about the main event as far as being a UFC interim lightweight title fight. Connor, here are the UFC champions right now. Flyweight, Joshua Van. Holy shit. Bantamweight, Piotr Jan. Holy shit. For how the last series of UFC events went, and those guys end up as champions. Featherweight, Alexander Volkanovski. Lightweight, Ilya Taporia. Are we sure? Are we sure? Is that guy going to fight at lightweight anytime soon? Charles Oliveira is by the rank number 2. Arman's ranked number 1. Max is 3. Gaethje and Patty 4 and 5 in the UFC lightweight rankings. Welterweight, Islam Makhachev. And for all the contenders at welterweight, I'd get comfortable. I don't know how long, and for lightweight, who the hell knows? That's quickly becoming heavyweight. Middleweight, Hamzat. Middleweight makes some sense, but Hamzat wants to go different places too. So does Pereira, champion at light heavyweight. And Jiri's probably going to end up fighting Carlos Ulberg for some sort of like interim or vacant belt, it seems. Heavyweight, Jesus Christ. Tom Aspinall is still a champion. And we got Cyril Gahn, Alexander Volkov, Sergey Pavlovich, Curtis Blades, Waldo, Jelton, Spivak, Derek Lewis, Ante DeLiha, Tybura, Taiju Ivasa, ranked 12th. Dude, what the hell what do you do at heavyweight? Do you just have to kill all 15 of these people and start fresh? Women's strawweight, Mackenzie Dern is the champion. And the world does make sense a little bit because Valentina Shevchenko is the women's flyweight champion. What a situation for all of these UFC belts. What a shit show. So
I have to say, Taito Ivasa being ranked 12th, that just tells me Gable Stevenson could come into the UFC right now and be a top 10, possibly top 5 heavyweight contender easily. I think if he just continues on his development path like he's doing and keeps training with who he's training with, I could easily see him becoming a dominant champion. Easily.
I think that was pretty clear from like his multiple forays into different things. He's jumped into stuff. Like I appreciate that he hasn't like been like super careful. He was in dirty boxing. He fought in it, like getting into it looks great. They'll sign him very soon. They'll test him. I think he'll pass with flying colors. These initial UFC heavyweight tests. I think people will be afraid to fight him.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And so, I mean, it tells me a few like other things too. Like, all right, where does Martin Bidet rank among this group? He's still top 13. And where does Will Fleury, who just knocked out Martin Bidet for the Octagon heavyweight title? What a weird division heavyweight is right now. They so badly need a slew of prospects.
They need Ngannou. Bring Ngannou back.
And who knows what's going on with Ngannou, too. That's been a weird saga. So, the main event, we've got the UFC interim lightweight championship between Justin Gaethje and Patty the Batty Pimblett. Justin Gaethje was saying he was probably going to retire if his next fight was not going to be a title fight. This could be the end of Justin Gaethje's career. Very possible. Justin Gaethje in this fight is the plus 187 underdog. Patty the Batty minus 222, the favorite.
Are you kidding me? I'm putting money on Gaethje right this second. I didn't know he was an underdog.
Here's the thing, is like Gaethje isn't one of these guys getting this spot after losing 3 of his last 4 or 3 of his last 5. We've seen that before. Justin Gaethje has won 3 of his last 4 fights, 4 of his last 6. Fiziev twice since March of 2023 and had the head kick knockout on Dustin Poirier. The only loss was the knockout of the year loss against Max Holloway at UFC 300. He has, still been winning these matchups that they're putting him in. It's a little bit different than this one, certainly, but, not a whole lot different. And then Patty, after the Jared Gordon fight, I was very hard on Patty because I thought he lost that fight, as a lot of people did. Against Tony Ferguson, it was like, all right, you beat a fast declining Tony, and you ended up looking good in a lot of moments, but you certainly had moments where you got hit. You looked like you were kind of in danger. So I was skeptical after that. You submit Bobby Green, July 2024. And again, it's like, I would hope, that is something that you can do if this is the hype that's behind you. It's not that that's not impressive. It's just like, all right, that doesn't tell me that the guy is like going to contend for a title soon, but it tells me he certainly could. And, that's possible. Then the fight against Michael Chandler. And, again, Michael Chandler was a guy who, up until the Paddy Pimblett fight, had lost four of his last five. He's now lost five of his last six, with his only win being Tony Ferguson, May of 2022. But it was the way that Paddy beat Michael Chandler. Like he really beat Michael Chandler down standing up, like beat him up. He got taken down a few times, got right back up. And that's not an easy thing to do against an athletic freak like Michael Chandler. And, Paddy had success wrestling in his own right, success in the grappling. The Michael Chandler fight, I was impressed with. So here's the thing with this fight, I acknowledge that this is often a fallacy of mine where it's like, it's hard to see the younger guys like it's hard to envision what their improvement will be the next fight. And Paddy certainly has improved with all of his performances. I absolutely see a route to victory here, but you also have to count on Paddy improvement and a little bit of Gaethje decline or less investment in this fight. Like I don't think Paddy will be able to beat Justin Gaethje up on the feet and not take a lethal level of damage like he was able to against Michael Chandler. I think that if Paddy wants to like take Justin Gaethje's back at some points in the fight, I think that that's gonna. I think that there will be moments where Justin Gaethje will be in danger, particularly in the grappling department. But Paddy Pimblett takes punches. Justin Gaethje throws a ridiculous amount of them. Justin Gaethje is he's like an old, like, I don't know, he's like an old freight train that still works and just keeps coming forward, blasting you. That part of him is not gone. We've seen that in all of his recent fights. I just think that Paddy's going to take a lot of damage, and you're counting on either Paddy being able to do more damage on the feet to Justin Gaethje, or you're planning on Paddy really dominating the grappling department. That seems possible, but it seems really difficult. And so I'm going Justin Gaethje money line plus 187.
Yeah, no, I agree with mostly everything you said. It's Michael Chandler is just not an impressive win to me. I do agree that the way that he beat Michael Chandler was impressive, but losing four out of your last five and your sole win being Tony Ferguson is just, I mean, that's just not a great record. And if you look at like how Charles Oliveira beat Michael Chandler compared to how Paddy Pimblett beat Michael Chandler, I feel like they did so in similar fashions, but I don't think that Pimblett has the finishing capabilities of Charles Oliveira, particularly on the ground. I do think he has a good ground game for sure, but I don't think he's as creative as Oliveira is. And I think that is what really was the deciding factor for Gaethje versus Charles Oliveira. I think his creative finishing ability is really what enabled him to get that win so impressively. So I do see Paddy possibly being able to have some success on the ground. I do think that Gaethje is. It's weird. I think he's a better grappler than what we think and what he showed. I just don't think that mentally he is ever in the mindset where like, oh, I need to be defensive when it comes to grappling. He's always just go, go, go like a freight train, trying to get into a brawl. And I feel like we've seen him pull back on that just a bit. And I think if he pulls back on that just a bit, fights a smart fight, I think he will definitely beat Pimblett. So I definitely am taking Gaethje money line. I think if Pimblett wins, it's going to be a submission. I think other than that, Gaethje may crack that chin. I don't know. What are the odds on Gaethje by KO?
Let's see here. Gaethje by knockout is plus 425.
Yeah. I think there's some value in that, but I also do think that Patty has a solid chin, and he's shown that before. So it's kind of a toss-up. I think since Gaethje is an underdog, money line is the best way to do it. But if you want to try to make an extra buck, I think Gaethje by KO is something to at least consider.
Yeah, and like if Patty beats Justin Gaethje, this version that I still think is of high quality and is a good percentage of the dude that, we all fell in love with, then I'll shut the hell up on his resume before that forever because it won't matter anymore. But to this point, Patty Pimblett, and I like his personality. I do. I see why you want to push him if you're the UFC. He
I
has
agree.
one win against a guy who is currently in the top 15, and it's Michael Chandler. He hasn't fought Beneil, Manuel Torres, Rufi, Farazayam, Fazayev, BSD. Definitely not Dan Hooker. They'll let them catch each other in an alley. Hasn't fought any of them. So it's a weird spot. And so next,
I will also
yeah.
just real quick point out for the main event. I know we talked about this a little bit off air, but I've seen some rumors that if Justin Gaethje's neck doesn't improve, and for those who aren't caught up, Gaethje claims he has an ingrown hair, but it certainly looks more like staph infection. And the rumor is if his neck doesn't improve by weigh-ins tomorrow, he's out. Arman Tsarukyan is in. In that scenario, I'm taking Arman Tsarukyan all day, every day. I think he dominates Patty everywhere. But just wanted to throw that out there in case things get messed up.
God, that would be crazy. And
Yeah. Remember, that would remind me of, I can't remember which card it was, but where Nate Diaz ended up fighting Tony Ferguson. Remember that whole debacle? That was insane.
That I still call bullshit. That was a fix from the beginning. They knew they wanted that matchup. As soon as people started giving them shit for matching Nate Diaz with Hamza, they were like, "Oh God, we gotta figure out an alternative." And they were like they're gonna give the Kevin Holland and Hamza could throw the solution right into our lap. Have those guys throw water bottles at each other backstage, and then we can do and like Hamza just miss weight. Or maybe you didn't even have to tell him, but they just planned on it. They just assumed he misses
knew.
weight by like a whole weight class. They're like, oh, he can't do it. They're like, oh, okay, here's what we'll do. We'll do Nate Diaz versus Tony. And everybody's like, perfect. And I'm like, oh, you had me going there for a minute. I really thought you were going to have Nate Diaz fight Hamza. Very good, folks. You really got me. Now, I'll forever call that the fix was in on that, but it was enjoyable. And next up, we've got a high stakes bantamweight matchup between Sugar Sean O'Malley and Song Yadong. Song Yadong, the plus 170 underdog. Sugar Sean, the minus 200 favorite. Here's what I'll say. Sean O'Malley, even still, regardless of what you think about the decision against Piotr Jan, I do not call that a robbery. It was a very close fight. This is the thing about Sean O'Malley is he might end up being controlled on the ground for a little bit or whatever, but his strikes have a lot of impact, and that's worth a lot to, judging if it goes to the scorecards. So I don't call it a robbery. It's a very close fight that people have different opinions on. Knocked out all Joe, thoroughly beat Marlon Vera in a revenge fight, and then you run into a guy that is your absolute kryptonite 2 times in a row over the course of a year. Merab twice. It was 48-47 on 2 of the judges' scorecards the first time he fought Merab. And then
That's crazy.
The second time he got absolutely wrecked. Merab looked like he figured out Sean as opposed to Sean getting used to parts of Merab. And then Song Yadong, the only 2 people that have beaten him since March of 2021, which was a very close fight with Kyler Phillips, is Corey Sandhagen and Piotr Jan. Against Piotr Jan, it was 29-28 on all 3 judges' scorecards. He's won 3 of his last 4 fights, a knockout of Ricky Simone, decision victories over Chris Gutierrez and Henry Cejudo. So, my thoughts on this fight. Who's going to have the very slight advantage on the feet? I'll call it slight, is Sean, because Song Yudong is going to come forward. He's going to throw his typical level of volume. Those strikes are meaningful. He, takes damage well too, if not for a few cuts that brought a premature end to some of his fights. It's going to be a banger on the feet. Sean's going to be looking to counter. I think the more likely of the two to get a knockout is going to be Sean, but Song Yudong could certainly get the better of this of two of the 3 rounds standing up if Sean isn't on his A game or Sean is misreading something strategically. Certainly, the more likely of the two to go for a takedown and succeed, I would say is Song Yudong. I just don't know how long Sean O'Malley would actually be down for. I do see value in Song Yudong plus 170. Like Sean O'Malley is comparable to Corey Sandhagen in terms of his physique and his build. The test that is at bantamweight, he's not as well rounded as Corey Sandhagen. And God, I can't wait to eventually see O'Malley versus Corey Sandhagen. I love that we haven't seen Yudong versus Sean O'Malley yet. But I just don't know. Like, I think Song Yudong could win this fight like 40, 45 times out of 100. But I think ultimately Sean has more of an advantage standing up in terms of the damage that he can do, being able to counter Song Yudong coming forward. And I don't think Song Yudong's well-roundedness is going to be enough of an advantage to negate the rest of that. So because this is 3 rounds, I'm going to say I can support Song Yudong plus 170. Keep an eye on that. If it gets wider, absolutely jump on it. But like Sean O'Malley by decision is plus 100. That's probably where I would go with that.
Yeah, I think I agree with mostly everything that you said. I think Sean is crafty, and I think his length will be a deciding factor. I think Song Yudong, he struggled a bit against Sandhagen. That was a close fight, but Sandhagen was able to use his reach effectively, and I think Sean will be able to do something similar. I think he's both him and Corey are very crafty strikers, and that was a matchup I would absolutely love to see. But I think Sean does have a slight advantage on the feet. I think Sean is a better grappler than people think, particularly with submissions off of his back, but I don't think that's necessarily going to be a factor here. I think Song will be able to take him down, 1 or 2 or 3 times. I don't think it's going to have the effect that it needs to be to turn the tide, essentially. So I see Song having success. I see O'Malley just being crafty and outstriking him. I see it as a close fight. I do like Sean by decision.
Yeah, I love this fight. Like, this is an awesome fight that needs to happen for bantamweight. With Petr Yan as the champion, who knows, this fight could determine someone who's next in line. There's no reason why it couldn't, depending on how situations shake out. So very important fight, and I think it's going to be very exciting. And speaking of exciting, Connor, we have a heavyweight matchup between Waldo Cortez Acosta and Derek Lewis. Derek Lewis, who is going to be 41 here shortly. Derek Lewis is the plus 270 underdog. Waldo is the minus 330 favorite. And so here's the thing. I am very split on this. I have stake in both of these guys in different ways because Waldo continues to surprise me. I think going back to even the Robelis fight or the Andrei Arlovsky fight, I had doubt. Like against Waldo or against Andrei Arlovsky, it was like, Andrei was kind of like beating everybody by decision that he was fighting for that period of time. He was having this weird resurgence at the age of like 72. And then Robelis was like one of the scariest dudes in the world before he fought Waldo, and everybody realized that he had absolutely no ground game, like absolutely none of it. And then you knock out Ryan Spann at heavyweight. Okay, like that is you knocking out Ryan Spann, struggling at light heavyweight, fighting at heavyweight. What meaning do I take from it? Then against Sergey Spivak, I thought that Sergey Spivak's grappling was going to be the difference maker. And it was not the case. He struggled to grapple with Waldo Cortez Acosta. Waldo tuned him up, way outstruck him. They each landed some hard punches. The only blemish on his record since April of 2023, because he's been very active. He fought 5 times in 2025. Crazy for a
He
heavyweight.
fought 5 times in 2025. That is insane.
Yeah. And twice in 2024, twice in 2023, his activity level has been very admirable. So the only blemish since Marcus Rogerio de Lima is a unanimous decision loss to Sergey Pavlovich that he lost 29-28 on 2 out of 3 judges' scorecards. Then wins 2 fights November of 2025, knocks out Ante DeLiha in what was a suspect outcome.
Yeah, that one was. I don't know. I think DeLeo won that fight, but that's a separate conversation.
I mean, what do you do? Like, if the thing is, if it should have been stopped, it should have been stopped. But like DeLiha, even though the shot that really crumbled Waldo seemed to be a poke to the eye, the fact is Waldo was against the wall, taking a lot of hard punches from that scary Croatian man. And then he ends up coming back from the eye poke and knocking him out. And then he knocked out Shamil Ghazayev November 22nd.
The Blob.
Yeah. And so Waldo continues to prove me wrong. I will say that. But the thing about Derek Lewis is everybody thought he was done when he lost 4 out of 5 and actually 5 out of 7 from August 2021 to November of 2023, with the only wins being Chris Daukaus and Marcus Rogerio de Lima. But he is coming off 2 straight knockout wins over Rodrigo Nascimento and Taliesin Teixeira. Those were both Fight Night main events. Here's my concern about Waldo in this one. All right. You can try to grapple Derek Lewis. You might have some success with it, but like Derek Lewis has gotten a lot better in that department. Still, like continues to improve in that department. Like except for the Jelton fight, obviously, like he seems harder to take down to most heavyweights, harder to kind of keep down, and it's hard to get close enough to him to grapple him anyway. Waldo does some dumb shit, is the problem. Waldo gets caught like showboating, for lack of a better term, like kind of like not really like moving away, just kind of like moving his head backward. You do some dumb shit against Derek Lewis and you're going to wake up in a few hours, is my concern. So like, who wins if this fight goes the distance? Waldo. Waldo could also absolutely get a finish. That Derek Lewis is going to be 41 soon, for sure. And any criticism I have of Waldo, again, I've been wrong on him plenty of times. But I could see him doing something real stupid here. And if you do something against it, you don't even get to make that mistake once. You don't get a second chance. If you make that mistake against Derek Lewis, it's death. So with Waldo being such a heavy favorite, I can get behind him in DFS. I can get behind him in some parlay stuff. I think that if you're going Waldo, like the Waldo by decision is plus 250. That's not bad at all. That's fine. Derek Lewis by knockout does plus 335. And that to me sounds like the single most likely individual outcome. I think Waldo is going to give Derek Lewis opportunities to put him away.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with mostly everything you said. And, this is one of those fights that like my heart 100% says Derek Lewis and my brain is kind of saying that too. I think exactly what you said. Derek Lewis, he has an underrated ground game when it comes to defending takedowns and being able to stand up when taken down. So I think it's certainly possible he gets taken down a time or two by Waldo, but I think he has the ability to stand up. And I think he has the power to put Waldo away. So I do really like Derek Lewis by knockout. But on the flip side, if you're going to bet on Acosta Cortez, definitely take it by decision. I think either one of those are a solid bet. But since my heart is saying Lewis KO, that's what I'm going with. That's where my brain's going to.
Yeah, and like Derek Lewis is a psychopath when he starts coming up with these like weird reasons for why he doesn't like the other guy. I think Waldo said something like, "I'm not black, I'm Dominican" or something, and Derek Lewis said, "Oh, so he one of those, huh?" And I'm like, "Oh, Christ, man! Like he's
You
coming up
fucked
with
up.
crazy reasons." Uh, Next up, we got Natalia Silva versus Rose Namajunas. Thug Rose in a women's flyweight matchup. Thug Rose is the plus 285 underdog. Natalia Silva, the minus 350 favorite. Thug Rose. It's weird because since she moved to flyweight September 2023 and fought Manon Farrow, when she fought Manon Farrow, she lost to her 29-28 on 2 of the 3 judges' scorecards. That was a very competitive fight. She beats then Amanda Ribas and Tracy Cortez by unanimous decision. Her loss to Erin Blanchfield, November 2024, another one of the top contenders at women's flyweight, lost 48-47 on all 3 of the judges' scorecards. And, then she comes and beats Miranda Maverick, knocks her down, gets 2 takedowns over the course of 3 rounds, ends up controlling for 6.5 minutes. So it's been a successful run at flyweight. Like if she had just even beat one of Manon Farrow or Erin Blanchfield, it's a whole different conversation. She's very much on the outside of contending, it seems here. This win would go a long way, but it's been a very successful run at flyweight for sure. Very competitive matchups with Manon and Erin Blanchfield. And now Natalia Silva. Coming off the win over Alexa Grasso by unanimous decision. Should be a Jessica Andrade by unanimous decision. Vivian Arajo, Andrea Lee, Victoria Leonardo. She knocked her out. She knocked out Teresa Bleda. I swear, like, obviously the wins over, because the win over Vivian Arajo actually was kind of lacking for, like, an impressive quality. It was 29-28 on all 3 scorecards. Andrea Lee, it was 30-27 on all 3. It didn't have as much of a wow factor. Obviously, Jessica Andrade and Alexa Grasso are the biggest names she's collected in her career. But the first memory I have of Natalia Silva was her fight with Jasmine in her UFC debut in 2022. And watching what she did to Jasmine, beating her 30-26 on one of the judges' scorecards, it was like, Jesus Christ, this girl is a killer. She is tearing her up. And it seems like she can get a little bit complacent at times. She had a little bit of a slow start against Jessica Andrade. That can be a dangerous thing. Jessica Andrade is someone that will like charge forward and make you pay for complacency. Rose is someone that is content to glide, stay on the outside, boost forward, not like karate-ish, but more just like, using her fleet of foot quality, getting in and out, still lands hard punches. She is a good grappler. It's going to be a tough matchup. I don't know how I see this fight really playing out. I think I probably just see Natalia Silva doing a little bit more in the stand-up. Maybe Rose trying to initiate some of the grappling and maybe has a little bit of success with it. It's proven very hard to take Natalia Silva down. Teresa Bleda did it once. Vivian Arajo did it once, and that's the extent of it. Alexa Grasso didn't do it. And by the same token, Rose had some success grappling Erin Blanchfield. She just wasn't very able to keep her down for that long. So I think like where this is trending, what the most likely outcome is probably Natalia Silva to win by decision. That's minus 200. So the odds makers agree on that point. But Thug Rose, Connor, she's proven very competitive at flyweight. Very competitive, close fights against some of the top contenders in the division. But why believe in Thug Rose? It's not like she's ever defied the odds when no one on earth gave her a chance in a big fight before, right? There's no way she's ever done that. I think Thug Rose is certainly a live dog at plus 285. So I think both of those are very justifiable.
Yeah, it's interesting because Bug Rose is like she has those wins that defied everyone's expectations and were incredible wins.
And then Carla is her kryptonite.
Yeah, I was gonna say she also has those fights where it's not the same fighter that shows up that night. So I think Natalia Silva is the more consistent fighter. It really just depends on which Thug Rose we see that night. Um, Honestly, I like Silva here. I think I agree with the odds makers. Silva by decision is the most likely outcome, but that's not going to net you much money. So if you're feeling like it's an underdog night, I think Thug Rose is definitely one of the more live underdogs to take. But my prediction here is Silva by decision.
Next up, this one has barn burner written all over it at featherweight. We got Arnold Allen. Hey, remember that guy? Arnold Allen? He's taking on Gene Silva. And that matchup, so we got Arnold Allen is the plus 210 underdog. Gene Silva, the minus 250 favorite. So, with Arnold Allen, last time we saw him was July 2024. Beating Giga Chikadze by unanimous decision. People forget Arnold Allen, just between July of 2019 and October of 2022, beat Gilbert Melendez, Nick Lentz, Sadiq Yusuf, Dan Hooker, and Calvin Kattar. The only two losses that Arnold Allen has had in the UFC, and in fact, the only two losses, two of his three pro losses, and the only two losses he has taken since 2014 were unanimous decision. They went the distance, losses to Max Holloway and Movsar Evloev back to back. Max only beat him 48-47 on one of the scorecards. And against Movsar Evloev, who controlled for 3.5 minutes on 5 takedowns, that was 29-28 on all three of those judges' scorecards.
I want to interject here and say I think Arnold Allen won that fight against Mosfar. I think if they didn't rule those knees as illegal, which they were not, they were illegal. They were certainly legal by today's standards, but even in the rule set back then, it had to be a weight-bearing hand, first of all. And second of all, every knee that landed, if you watch it closely, his hand was up on every single knee that landed. So I thought he won that fight. Sorry to interject there. Very important point to make.
Yeah, and like, I think that the reason that Movsar ends up winning that fight is not as relevant in this matchup. Gene Silva, like it was a quick rise from the Contender Series when he beat Kevin Vallejos. It was Weston Wilson next. Went on this big knockout streak against then Wilson, Charles Jourdain, Drew Dober, Melzik Bagdasarian, and then the big finish was the submission of Bryce Mitchell. That was a fight that got a lot of attention for some of the wrong reasons, perhaps. And then the amazing, it was UFC Noche fight, the main event there between Gene Silva and Diego Lopez, an absolute banger. Both guys were hurt at different times. Gene Silva really, probably should, that fight for most people probably would have been stopped in the first round when Diego Lopez was landing all the ground and pound. Diego Lopez won that fight because he is a more balanced, wise, and well-rounded fighter. He was able to, succeed on the ground when it went there. Gene Silva charges forward. He does crazy stuff. He has a lot of weapons in his arsenal. I will give him that. But between these two, even though it's been such a long time since we've seen Arnold Allen, we saw Gene Silva 3 times each in the last 2 years. Arnold Allen is the guy with the more impressive resume. And to beat Calvin Kattar and Dan Hooker in those kinds of fights, to go the distance and be competitive with Max Holloway, and to against a guy like Movsar, who has just been an unsolvable skill for the rest of the division to handle. Arnold Allen let everybody fall asleep on him while in his hiatus. And I think that Gene Silva is going to hurt Arnold Allen, but I think that Arnold Allen is probably going to be just a little bit smarter in this fight. And perhaps taking a little bit of time off for Arnold Allen after that whole, that's all those fights in a row against all those murderers, maybe that's a good thing. Because Gene Silva, this is going to be his 4th fight in the last 365 days. And, especially coming off of the Diego Lopez fight, maybe he starts losing, a little bit more steam. Maybe we see it here. So I don't exactly, this fight could end in 1,000 different ways. But I think Arnold Allen certainly has more of a shot than the odds makers are giving him. So give me Arnold Allen plus 210 on the money line.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think this is an amazing matchup, and I think Arnold Allen is frequently slept on, and I think that is the case here. I think he's a very consistently good fighter, and John Silva, he's certainly an amazing fighter, but he has, just those weaknesses that like people like Diego Lopez can exploit. And I think Arnold Allen is one of those people that can exploit those weaknesses. I think he's just exactly like you said, just going to have a bit of a smarter fight. I think Arnold Allen is the type to come in with a game plan, and I think a game plan is exactly what you need against an opponent like John Silva. So I like Arnold Allen, especially as an underdog here.
And next up, can you believe this is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? This is the sixth fight, like sixth highest up fight at bantamweight. Umar Nurmagomedov and Davison Figueiredo on the same card with Sugar Sean and Song Yadong. Umar Nurmagomedov, Connor, is the minus 1,500 favorite.
Oh God, take care of your underwears. I'm gonna you, man.
Davison Figueiredo, the plus 850 underdog. I got new sound drops and I forget what each button is, so I'm gonna be testing it out as we go along. But I love that I recorded that one. So here's the thing. This might be a shorter conversation. Umar, 19-1 as a professional. He is almost the perfect bantamweight. It just so happens that there's a dude named Merab that he fought back in January of 2025 and lost on a very, very slim margin. It was a unanimous decision. It was 48-47 on 2 of the 3 judges' scorecards. Really, I wouldn't disagree too much with the way that anybody chose to score it. It was razor-thin margins in that fight. It's crazy that we haven't seen Umar versus Petr Yan. And I think that maybe we could if, Umar was to win this fight in impressive fashion. Why not? There's so many possibilities for who can be next now that Petr Yan is the champion again. Something that I really don't think too many people realistically saw coming. But the other thing about Umar is that his rise also didn't include a ton of big names. It was Sergey Morozov, Brian Kelleher, Nate Maness, Randy Barcelos, Beksat Almakhan, and then you get Corey Sandhagen. And that was what Corey Sandhagen had really, really close fights with Jan and with TJ Dillashaw. You could argue that, Corey maybe won one of those. But there was no argument in Umar versus Corey. Outstruck him 98-71, took him down 5 times in that fight, controlled for 5 minutes. And then the very close loss where Merab was able to take Umar down 7 times. Umar got 2 takedowns of his own. To be taken down 7 times when you're used to taking people down 11, 5, 5, 3, 5 times is crazy. And then he bounces back with a win over Mario Batista. It was 30-27 on all 3 of the judges' scorecards. Mario Batista did get a knockdown. It was 11 takedowns for Umar, 10 minutes and 46 seconds of control. And that was with Mario Batista being on a winning streak that was capped off with Ricky Simone, Jose Aldo, and Patchy Mix. Figueiredo is almost a decade older. I love Davison Figueiredo. I can't think of too many people that don't. He's coming off a win against Montel Jackson by split decision. It was some pretty thorough beatings in the 2 fights before that against Sandhagen and Jan. And the guys that he was capable of beating at bantamweight 2-3 years ago, they're not the guys that we're looking at now as title contenders. Rob Font, Cody Garbrandt, Marlon Vera. Those are great, beloved, exciting fighters at bantamweight. But it's not the kind of guy that tells me that, still at this age, you're capable of beating a guy like because if you're capable of beating Umar Nurmagomedov, you're capable of being the bantamweight champion. And I don't think that's the reality for Deiveson Figueiredo at this point in his career. Give me Umar Nurmagomedov. I mean, like minus 1,500 in a parlay isn't that bad if you're doing my boxing strategy and stacking it up with a lot more heavy favorites. Umar is not a guy that he hasn't submitted anybody in close to 4 years. I think that like inside the distance is probably the way. It's 3 rounds though. It's 3 rounds. Umar by decision is minus 125. Umar inside the distance is plus 120. So I'll opt for plus money at plus 120 for inside the distance.
Yeah, what did you say Umar by decision was?
It's loading again. Umar by decision is minus 125. I will also point out that Umar to cover minus 3.5 is minus 600.
Minus 125 for Umar by decision. You said minus 125? That seems kind of crazy to me.
Yeah, and inside the distance is plus 120. I see the merit in both.
Yeah, no, I like Umar by decision. I think that's a really solid bet. But I will say, guy, this is a hear me out one. So Umar, he does have the tendency to get rocked in every fight at least once. And I think Figueiredo is the type of fighter that has the power to put people out. We have seen that before. Even at bantamweight, he is a very powerful dude. So the odds are so crazy that I would not call you crazy if you put just a little bit of money on Figueiredo by knockout. What are the odds on that one?
Oh boy. Let's see. Figueiredo. I would love it. I really, when Figueiredo came to bantamweight, I was really hoping that one day he'd at least fight for the bantamweight title, and that has slipped away. Figueiredo by knockout is plus 2,000.
I actually am seeing it on a Hard Rock as plus 4,000, so double the money. Screw it. Put a bit of money on that. Thank me later. Put money on that. Just put a little bit of money on that, and then put a lot of money on Umar by decision, and you're in a winning position.
Put your nest egg on Figueiredo by knockout plus 2,000. You can retire to Florida like Connor has.
There you go.
Next up, this can be a short one too. Middleweight, Atiba Gauthier against Andre Puliev. Gauthier is the minus 800 favorite. Puliev the plus 550 underdog. Here's what I'll say about Puliev. All right, between the Contender Series and his fight with Nick Klein, he has won 2 of his 3 fights at this level. Like it's not like he's riding, 4 losses in a row coming into this. He wasn't finished in his loss. He did get his ass kicked up and down the cage by Christian Leroy Duncan. Got outstruck 73-18, wasn't knocked down one, but he still lost 30-26 on one of the scorecards. So Puliev takes damage. It seems to wear it well. And even though he knocked out Nick Klein in his last fight in August, Nick Klein is a very, very, very different fighter than Andre Puliev is fighting on Saturday. Atiba Gauthier, 6'4", 81-inch reach. I do not buy for a second that this dude actually makes 185 pounds. And coming off of, like on the Contender Series, second round knockout, first round knockout over Jose Daniel Medina, knocks out Robert Valentin in the first round, and then knocks out Tristan Vines in the first round at UFC 320. Here's the issue, all right, is that 2 of Gaultier's matchups in the UFC have just been knockout showcases. They were just sacrifices that they made to Atiba Gauthier. At the same time, Gauthier looks like an absolute stone cold murderer in those fights. And the competition aside, at least beating Robert Valentin, like, even though Valentin's 0-3 in the UFC, like the competition has not really been there. But Puliev's wins over Liam Anderson and Nick Klein, it's not like those are incredible as far as quality goes. I see no reason why Gaultier doesn't do to Puliev. Like, you cannot take 70 strikes from Gaultier like you did against Christian Leroy Duncan. Gaultier won't need that many. And unfortunately, Gaultier by knockout isn't going to be enough to be worth. Gaultier by knockout is minus 600. And so I think, like, straight up, what makes the most sense is probably to try to go more specific and go maybe like, because I do think Puliev can take damage well. Maybe he makes it to the second round, and you get a much better value on Gaultier in round 2 by knockout. It's plus 350 as opposed to minus 170 for the first round. Now, as like, if you wanted to go really crazy, Gaultier, who comes out of Cameroon, has one loss in his career, and he's 23 years old. So you have to assume that this guy's getting better, and it's going to get better for years, which is terrifying. But he lost a split decision to 0-0 Glenn Williams in Budo Fighting Championship July 2022. If you want to go insane, Puliev by decision is plus 1,200. And I think that's the most likely outcome. I think that if he wins, I think that it probably comes by decision. Maybe Gaultier gasses out from trying to finish Puliev and, doesn't make it happen. And, Puliev is able to nickel and dime his way through the rest of the second and third round. If you want to go crazy, Puliev by decision. But I think, if you're trying to make money on this one, I'd say Gaultier in round 2 by knockout.
I think there's some value
to go crazy by Gaultier by decision, actually. Exactly like you said. Maybe he gasses himself out, but
yeah.
He still wins 2 of 3 rounds, or 3 of the 3 rounds. You just can't find that finish. There are some fighters that just, they're hard to finish, whether it's they're tough or they're crafty, not necessarily crafty enough to win. But hey, I mean, I'm seeing Gaultier by a decision at plus 900. I mean, it's, I feel like that's worth it, because some fights, they just go to decision. Sometimes the finish just isn't there that night, no matter how good the fighter is. And this could be one of those fights.
It's crazy too, because that decision that we're referencing was against Christian Leroy Duncan, who
he's a good fighter. He's a finisher. He's a good striker. So I mean,
not only that, he destroyed Puliev over the course of 3 rounds, but every other win by CLD in the UFC has been a knockout in round 1 or 2. And
my point exactly.
Dusko, Claudio Ribera, Dennis Tia-Llewellyn, Eric Anders, and Marco Tulio. Not exactly a who's who, but neither is Puliev, and Puliev was able to make it the distance. So there is something there. Let me see if Puliev has ever. Let me see if all 3 of his losses. What are they? He has lost once by knockout. It was to Anverbek Danielbekov in Storm on the Neva, March of 2023. Even as an amateur, all of his losses except for one were by decision. The other one was by rear naked choke.
It's really interesting. His amateur record is 3-5. And then he goes on to be a 10-3 pro fighter. I feel like I've not seen a discrepancy that big in amateur record versus pro record before. That's interesting.
You get it with like some South American guys, some Eastern European guys. I don't know what they're doing over in their amateur stuff. Who knows? Who knows? You might, the other fighter, they might have the Lithuanian mob on their side and in their corner, and they've got money on the over. Who knows? And this next one is also very interesting, and I kind of hope it doesn't go the way that I think it will, or that I've accepted that it will. But we got a light heavyweight matchup between Nikita Krylov and Modestas Bukauskas. Modestas Bukauskas is, where'd it go? Modestas Bukauskas is The minus 142 favorite. Krylov, the plus 122 underdog. So on Bukowski's first, several like kind of stints in the UFC. He took losses to three decent fighters, and Crute, Michael Alexajuk, that was a split decision. Then he got knocked out by Khalil Roundtree, got knocked out by Vitor Petrino. Ultimately, since February of 2023, he's still won 6 of his last 7 UFC fights. It was against Tyson Pedro, Zach Pauga, Marcin Prachnio, Rafael Cerqueira, Ian Kudalaba, and Paul Craig. I will give you the credit for beating Prachnio, Kudalaba, and Craig. Pedro, Pauga, and Cerqueira, especially Cerqueira, I would hope so. If you want to hang around, but the Prachnio, Kudalaba, and Paul Craig, those are definitely decent wins for a guy that we didn't think would be hanging around the UFC as long as he has. And now Nikita Krylov, a guy I was very hopeful for, his different periods of inactivity. He's fought so many of the best light heavyweights in the world, been in the UFC since UFC 164 back in 2013. And as of now, I mean, he's won 3 of his last 7. He's technically won 3 of his last 5. He was on a 3-fight winning streak from July 2022 to March of 2023. Knocked out Alexander Gustafsson, beat Volkan by unanimous decision, and submitted Ryan Spann. Then his next fight comes more than 2 years later against Dominic Reyes. Knocked out in the first round. Made it look easy. It was when we thought Dominic Reyes was going to be making another run to the light heavyweight title. And then fights Bogdan Guskov and gets knocked out in the first round. Oh, God, is the writing on the wall for a light heavyweight who suddenly cannot take the punches that he used to. It's unfortunate. Nikita Krylov and Alexander Rakic, those were 2 guys I've rooted for a long time to make their way to the contending spot we once thought they could. But this is not a slope that people tend to recover from, at least immediately. It took time for Dominic Reyes. And what Dominic Reyes did was rare. We're not used to seeing people getting finished that many times in a row, come back and have a nice stretch of wins, and hell, might have even been a win away from another title opportunity. Krylov, and Bukowskis is a step down for sure, but Bukowskis cracks people, and I think that Modestus Bukowskis. How many times has Krylov been he's been submitted by Paul Craig, but so is every UFC champion, apparently. Krylov's been submitted a handful of times. I don't know how incredibly likely it is that Bukowskis does that. I don't think you have to pick an outcome here because there are a lot of variables between these 2 guys at career crossroads. I'll just kind of say I would love to root for Nikita Krylov, but I think from those last 2 performances, I think the writing's on the wall, and I'm going to go with Modestus Bukowskis money line minus 142.
Yeah, no, I think I'm in agreement with that. Krylov has just seemed to be on a steady decline, and Bukowskis is, he's won 6 out of his last 7. I think he has some momentum, and I think that momentum continues. And I think I definitely like him here. And sorry, what were the odds on this one? You said
minus 142 for Bukowskis, plus 122 for Krylov.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, minus 142. I like that money line. I'm taking that all day.
Yeah, and honestly, based on our logic of why we think Bukowskis wins this, Bukowskis by knockout plus 130 is actually probably the smarter way to go. If Krylov's chin is fading as a result of, especially coming off 2 first-round knockouts that happened in 2025, you might as well just go Bukowskis plus 130 because that is the logic that we're basing this pick off of.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense.
All right, Connor, we got 2 more fights before you get out of here and leave the last 3 to me. We've got a flyweight matchup between Alex Perez and Charles Johnson. Alex Perez, the plus 145 underdog. Charles Johnson, the minus 170 favorite. Alex Perez. I will start with the underdog here. Here's some amazing facts about Alex Perez. Alex Perez got his flyweight title shot against Davison Figueiredo on a 3-fight winning streak over Mark De La Rosa, Jordan Espinoza, and Josier Formiga. Not an incredibly impressive winning streak even for 2019-2020. That got him that title fight, in which he was finished rather quickly by Davison Figueiredo. Loses 3 in a row from November 2020 to March of 2024. It get finished by a guillotine from Figueiredo, neck cranked by Pantoja, and then loses a unanimous decision to Muhammad Makayev. They each had a good amount of control in that fight. That was a more competitive fight from Alex Perez. Against a guy in Makayev, especially at the time, was not as well-rounded, but ended up being, well-rounded enough against Perez. Finally gets a win April of 2024 with a finish of Matheus Nicolau, and then gets finished 2 more times in a row. June of 2024, knocked out in the second round against Tatsuro Taira. November of 2025, a fight that he was doing quite well in, gets submitted by Asuam Babayev in the 3rd round. And so, Connor, that brings the grand total for Alex Perez in his last 6 fights. 6 fights that date all the way back to November of 2020. He has 1 win, Matheus Nicolau, since he beat Josier Formiga to get his title shot nearly 5.5 years ago. Like about that number. It is crazy that he's had to go through such a ringer, and it has 1 win. It has 3 wins this decade out of 9 fights. Unfortunate. He's had to fight so many tough dudes, but he, maybe had some opportunities against Makayev, and he was well on his way. He had the Asuam Babayev fight in his grasp just November last year and ends up getting subbed. Really, against Tatsuro Taira, Pantoja, and Figueiredo, that was a lamb going to slaughter for the most part. Charles Johnson. This guy is a pillar that has kept the flyweight division up on fight nights, taking on your risers. This guy's not afraid to fight people. We didn't think all that highly of him up until 2024. He goes on the winning streak, beats Azat Maxim, Jake Hadley, Joshua Van in what was a sizable upset with the knockout. Sumata Harry. He's won 5 of his last 6 fights dating back to February 2024. There's another guy that's been quite active. The only loss since then has been to Ramazan Timurov by unanimous decision. It was 29-28 on all 3 judges' scorecards. And Timurov is a guy that, has after that emerged as another one of the younger flyweights that can make their way up in the rankings, as a lot of those guys that came kind of went. Makayev's not even the UFC right now for dumb reasons. Amir Albazi, Tyra, Urseg, Starboy, and Starboy is the one, hilariously, for all the canceled fights, all the antics, Starboy is the one who might be the closest to actually winning the flyweight title if he ends up getting matched up with Joshua Van. And then Charles Johnson is coming off of a 2nd-round knockout victory over Loner Kavanaugh August of last year. That was Kavanaugh's first professional loss after going 3-0 in the UFC, counting that knockout over another hot prospect, Antoine Ho, on the Contenders Series. Charles Johnson is not a guy that you want to fight if you're a prospect on the rise or if you're trying to get right. I don't know how Charles Johnson does exactly in this one. Minus 170, I don't think is a very bad money line pick. Like if you're, he's never even been submitted in the UFC, and he's fought plenty of guys that were capable of it. So, if Alex Perez was to win, it'd be by unanimous decision. But Perez has been knocked out, I guess just once over. He's mostly been submitted. over this losing streak that extends back almost 6 years.
Yeah, no, this is an interesting fight. I think Charles Johnson has the momentum, and I think he's going to get a win here. I think he's a consistent fighter. Perez kind of on a decline. I think Charles Johnson, I think he has a pretty sizable reach advantage. Am I correct in that assumption?
That would make sense.
Oh.
Yeah, about 5 inches. He's also 3 inches taller than Alex Perez. The thing, like, Perez takes people down, he can, but like not a ton. He's a grappler, not a wrestler. Is the
Yep.
Charles Johnson is not that easy to take down.
Exactly.
Timarov did it once over the course of 3 rounds. Kavanaugh did it once. Van did it once, and that was because things weren't going that great for him in that fight. Maxim did it twice, but Charles Johnson did it twice to him. The only, that was the biggest problem for Johnson in the first handful of his UFC fights. Mikhaev took him down 12 times. Ode Osborne got him 3 times. Cody Durden got him 11. And Rafael Stavon got him 3 times. But Alex Perez is not that dude. And so the way I see this fight playing out is, maybe Perez has a moment where he gets Charles Johnson's back. Maybe he gets a moment where he jumps a guillotine. And, it looks like that could be I could definitely see that. But if Alex Perez, if his plan is to win this fight on the feet, that's not going to go well. He's going to get pieced up, and it's going to be chin music for Charles Johnson. I would say, like, knockout or decision. I would go like method of victory double chance, knockout or decision, and I'd be happy with that if it was even minus 169 as compared to the money line of minus 170.
Yeah, no, I think I'm totally in agreement there. I like Charles Johnson by finish, probably, maybe inside the distance. I think this is a good matchup, though, but I'm taking Johnson all day.
Oh, God. Take care of your underwears. I'm gonna you, man.
Oh, God, I'll never stop finding that entertaining. And next up, we got a lightweight matchup. It would have been exciting 5 years ago, 8 years ago. It's exciting today. Michael Johnson and Alexander Hernandez. Alexander Hernandez is the minus 140 favorite. Michael Johnson, the plus 120 underdog. Let's see what this soundbite is.
But I'm not impressed by your performance.
I kept that one. All right. So let's start with the favorite, Alexander Hernandez, on a 4-fight winning streak. And, I've never been a big fan of Alexander Hernandez. We've seen him look fantastic against, like, Chase Hooper, for instance. But even 3 of his last 4 wins against Diego Ferreira, Kurt Holloway, and Austin Hubbard, that's sort of the category of Michael Johnson, but not really. Like, Holloway and Hubbard are elder statesmen, and Ferreira, what? Like, Ferreira's actually sleepily over 40 years old. He's actually 41 right now. And so Chase Hooper is kind of like the outlier of that group. And, we knew that Chase Hooper still standing up, that was still a work in progress, even August 2025. Hernandez went through a stretch where he lost 4 of 5 fights against Moicano, Billy Q, Bill Algeo, and Damon Jackson. And the thing about Michael Johnson is, this guy isn't 40 yet. He will be in a handful of months. He'll have a 1-inch reach advantage. He's an inch taller. Clown this guy all you want for the amount of trash talk and subsequent losses he's taken in the UFC over 15 plus years, because that Ultimate Fighter finale was December of 2010 when he entered the UFC. He's fought everybody. Beat Tony Ferguson in 2012 and beat Joe Lozon, Melvin Gillard, Edson Barboza, fought Daniel Dariush and Nate Diaz, beat Dustin Poirier. It had a moment against Habib, a banger against Justin Gaethje. He continued, like, it's always been a thing, like, they've always been able to put this guy against people like that. And he's now won 4 of his last 5 fights dating back to December of 2022. He's on a 3-fight winning streak. Again, and here's the thing. Darius Flowers, okay, whatever. Knocks out Otman Azatar, whatever. Okay, cool, good for him. UFC 318 pulls a big upset and gets a unanimous decision, tuning Daniel Zellhuber up on the feet. Whoa, that's a different thing. That's a different win than Darius Flowers or Otman Azatar. And I really liked the way that he looked in that last fight. I don't know if Alexander Hernandez, based on the last 4 fights that he's had, when you go to split decision with Austin Hubbard, the Kurt Hollabaugh fight, that was 29-28 on 2 of the 3 judges' scorecards. Diego Ferreira, super old and has not had as much success over the last few years, even as Michael Johnson. Telling me I can get Michael Johnson as an underdog plus 120. I don't know if it's likely that he would finish Alexander Hernandez, but he can for sure beat him over the course of 3 rounds.
Yeah, honestly, I could see Michael Johnson getting a finish. You know, he's got fast hands. He's got a lot of power, but I think him just being an underdog at all on the money line is 100% worth it. I'm taking Michael Johnson all day. I've never really liked Hernandez. You know, he looks impressive sometimes, but Michael Johnson is one of those guys that no matter how impressive you are, no matter how impressive you look, he fights to that level. And I just don't think Alexander Hernandez is one of those guys that can beat a crafty veteran that has power and that has incredible hand speed. I'm taking Johnson all day, every day.
And like Hernandez, he looks like a guy that would like get like in a fight in fraternity intramural soccer. And Michael Johnson by knockout, that's plus 325. But Michael Johnson by decision is plus 350. So I'm going Michael Johnson by decision. I can't believe the disrespect of Michael Johnson, who has beaten so many of the greatest lightweights of all time. It's nuts.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think this might be my lock for the night, but it's a good fight, good pick. Excited to see it happen.
All right, folks, we got 3 fights left. I think Connor's going to get out of here. Give it up for Connor Bone Slone. Connor, thank you for being here for the first UFC Picks episode for 2026. Enjoy these fights. We'll be in touch.
You bet. See you, Brady.
All right, folks, we move on to an exciting heavyweight match. And here I was talking about heavyweight needing prospects, needing up-and-comers. Here's an opportunity with Josh Hokett versus Denzel Freeman. And you know the UFC would love to push Josh Hokett. He has a personality that inspires strong feelings.
I want to tell me what you see. Let's go ahead and see by the fight what you saw in the ring.
So Josh Hokett is the minus 220 favorite. Denzel Freeman, the plus 185 underdog. So Josh Hokett, I'm going to go to Tapology, get a more complete history. 7-0 as a professional. You know, this guy does the whole like kind of Colby Covington, a little bit of like WWE kind of personality thing. Cool. That's going to bother people that don't realize it's a character. It's a bit, folks. It's a bit. He is doing it to get the attention you're giving him. You're making him famous if you hate him, is the funny thing. Inside the distance has been the way he's won all 7 of his professional fights. This guy was a college wrestler, I believe it was at Fresno State, and also played college football for Fresno State. Had like a little stint where he was trying out for like different NFL teams, I believe. But he's only ever fought in good promotions. It's crazy. His first 2 professional fights were in Bellator, and he finished both of those by submission. Then he has 3 straight fights in LFA. 2 of those wins were TKO. The other one was a rear naked choke. Gets on the Contender Series, finishes Guilherme Uriel by 2nd round TKO via elbows. And then in his UFC debut, his true UFC debut, back November 8th of 2025, finishes Max Jimenez with a round 1 knockout. Jimenez at 6-2, while like you would have guessed he'd be a candidate to possibly get knocked out because that was his other professional loss to a 2-4 opponent, David White, in Shogun fights in March 2023. The thing is, Max Jimenez has a fantastic professional grappling pedigree. It at least says something about Josh Hokett that he was able to, fight a guy off with that kind of skill set and not getting any danger in that department. So, what Josh Hokett has actually proved in his time as a professional MMA fighter and his time in the UFC, like I think he's proved plenty. It's actually been overshadowed by the personality things that he does, and the win over Guilherme Uriel. That's a guy that also had in total a 4-1 record in LFA, mostly finishing people, with the only other loss being to Lucas Camacho, November of 2023. So Josh Hokett has proved plenty. Now, he will be taking on Denzel Freeman. I was on Denzel Freeman, who, by the way, 34 years old. He is going to be a little bigger than Josh Hokett. I think they're the same height. Denzel Freeman has some larger arms, as I recall, and might weigh just like a little bit more, it seems. And Denzel Freeman, here's what I'll say. All right, because he only has he's 7-1 as a professional. And his only loss is by decision, a split decision to Isaiah Pinson in PFL. He also his only amateur loss was to Johnny Eblen. That Johnny Eblen in 2016 at a 230-pound catchweight fight by unanimous decision. And, this is a guy that in PFL challengers, he's been in Titan FC. That's where his first 3 professional fights were. Got a knockout of Raiden Kovacs in the PFL Challenger Series. Lost that split decision to Isaiah Pinson. That's not a bad loss, especially considering it was so close and it was now close to 3 years ago. His 3 wins in a row. Steven Asplin in LFA by rear naked choke. That guy's in the UFC now. For the LFA heavyweight title, he TKO'd Hugo Kuna, who we at least saw on the Contender Series, and he beat Marek Bujlo by unanimous decision in his real UFC debut back in November. And Marek, also is a guy that was finishing a lot of people by submission. You definitely question his professional pedigree coming into the UFC. But the Kuna wins, the Asplin wins, those are quality. These are 2 heavyweights that absolutely have impressive resumes coming into the UFC. I think Freeman's size, he is going to be on average about 30 pounds heavier than Josh Hokett. This is a real tough one for Josh Hokett. I think that he's definitely the more likely of the 2 to win this fight inside the distance. And that would be counting on Josh Hokett actually just being the more explosive athlete, possibly with the greater skill set, maybe with the more meaningful professional pedigree. Imagine we have Hokett and Gable Stevenson making their way up at the same time. But Denzel Freeman has 2 wins by decision. So here's how I would go with this. I would use Hokett at -220 in a parlay. I don't hate that if I need something in that range to piece something together. But Denzel Freeman money line isn't bad at all at +185. I think Denzel Freeman is the much more likely of the 2 to win this in, over the course of 3 rounds, and particularly if it's a boring fight, kind of like Denzel Freeman's UFC debut was, then definitely the edge to Denzel Freeman. And for him to win by decision is... Are they not showing those individual props? Okay. Freeman by decision is +500. You can hit it. Hokett inside the distance, +105. Not nearly as much reward there. If I was going DFS, Hokett's expensive, but he's the one more likely to actually get you to triple digits. Freeman could win and get like 50 to 60 points. I could see that. I'm convincing myself more of Freeman. These are two guys at heavyweight that definitely have very respectable professional resumes prior to coming into the UFC. And I think what they proved in their UFC debut was important too. I just think maybe like what Hokit proved on the Contender Series and in the UFC was like maybe worth just a little bit more. But Freeman has some fantastic wins in LFA. So this one's important for heavyweight, especially if Hokit wins, because that's a much more, if Freeman wins, cool, he could be on his way up. If Hokit wins, get ready for the shit talking storm, for the promo dumps. They'll push that guy if they can. 2 fights left. We got a bantamweight matchup between Ricky Tercios and Cameron Smotherman. Ricky Tercios back at it. And so Ricky Tercios is the plus 157 underdog. Cameron Smotherman, the minus 182 favorite. And, Ricky Tercios had a rough go of it for some time after winning the Ultimate Fighter over Brady Highstan. Ricky now sits at 12-5, 32 years old. He's lost 2 in a row, got submitted by Raul Rosas Jr., lost a unanimous decision to Bernardo Sopaj. His one win since the Ultimate, and both of his wins in the UFC, counting the Ultimate Fighter finale, were split decisions over Brady Highstan and Kevin Natividad. Also lost a unanimous decision to Ayman Zahabi, and no shame in that, considering that guy went on to beat Javid Basharat, Pedro Munoz, Jose Aldo, and Marlon Vera. Even on the Ultimate Fighter, he beat Dan Argueta and Ludwig Shalinian. Ricky had a good professional resume coming into the Ultimate Fighter. When he won the Ultimate Fighter, it was reasonable to think that things wouldn't go this bad. But losses to Zahabi, to Rosas, to Sopaj, those aren't the worst things in the world. Let me check on what Sopaj. Yeah, he lost his UFC debut to Vinicius Oliveira. That's not bad by any means. I question kind of his professional resume coming into the UFC. Mostly wins in Fight Club Rush, but still. Now, to Cameron Smotherman. If Tapology wasn't burning a hole in my computer's hard drive. The babyface killer, 12-6, 28 years old. Was, made his name in Fury FC for the most part. Took a lot of losses kind of early in his career, but he was very active. Ended up, beating Mondo Gutierrez, Jake Hadley in his UFC debut. He's coming off 2 straight unanimous decision losses to Sergey Saidi and Ricky Simone. And against Sergey Saidi, he got controlled for 4 minutes of that fight. It was 29-28 on 2 of the judges' scorecards. Against Ricky Simone, he got taken down 3 times, outstruck slightly, 29-28 on 1 of the judges' scorecards. So, it's actually probably Cameron who's probably had the the more impressive UFC run over the last few years, because Ricky Tercios beating Kevin Natividad. It's a guy that went 0-3 in the UFC over the course of 2 years. These odds again. The hell? Come on, man. It's been going on so long. Smotherman minus 182. Yeah, they've kind of both depended on some. They've both been in some close fights. Smotherman's win over Jake Hadley was 29-27 on 2 scorecards, 30-26 on 1 of them. He lost to Charlampos Gregorio on the Contender Series and got knocked out by him. That's not awesome. Ricky is a lot harder to trust. He gets hurt. He plays around a little bit. I think he's sometimes a little bit more sizzle than steak. We've just seen him get dominated more, and so I don't know. I don't feel strongly about this one, and mostly like I blame that on Ricky. This is a nice opportunity for Cameron Smotherman to bounce back. This could be the nail in Ricky Tercios' coffin. So I don't know. Cameron Smotherman minus 182 money line. I don't feel strongly about that. But also Smotherman being a few years younger, Ricky being 32, Smotherman being 28, and he's actually like smaller. He'll have a smaller reach at least, but I think Cameron Smotherman is the more likely of the two to come into this fight better than he was in his last one. I think that's what this comes down to. Smotherman minus 182, and what are the odds for Smotherman by decision, I guess? Come on. Yeah, so Smotherman by decision is plus 110. Okay. Hit it. And we are to the last fight of this card of UFC 324, the first event of the Paramount Plus era, the first UFC event of 2026. The last fight on this slate is Adam Fugit versus Ty Miller at welterweight. Adam Fugit, sizable underdog here. He's plus 355. Ty Miller is the minus 425 underdog. Oh, Jesus, topology. I just need you to work for Ty. If you can do that, if you can get me through with Ty. There you go. Ty Miller. 6-0 as a professional. Ty Thriller Miller, sick nickname. At welterweight, 6'2", 77.5-inch reach, 25 years old, born out of Albuquerque, fighting out of Albuquerque.
Take care of your underwears. I'm gonna you, man.
4 wins by decision, 2 wins by knockout, 1-0 in LFA, 1-0 on the Contender Series. He came up for the most part. He lost his first amateur fight, and he's never looked back past that. Had 2 wins in Cage Fury, both by decision. One was over Eric Nolan. LFA, he finished Ryan Charleboy with a knockout in the first round. Then had a no contest in LFA. Then he beat Jimmy Drago by unanimous decision on the Contender Series back in August. And Jimmy Drago was like, Drago's a little bit older, certainly not as big, like in height and reach. But Jimmy Drago was a guy that had been around the block to, a bunch of different promotions, held different regional belts, hadn't done much losing. His professional resume wasn't like the most reputable, is the only thing. But Ty Miller, certainly a problem and a puzzle to solve in his stature at welterweight even. Now, Adam Fugit, he's 6'1" with a 77-inch reach for welterweight. This could be an interesting thing. Fugit, who are his losses in the UFC? Because he's gone 2-3 in the UFC. He's been on 3 pay-per-view cards in his 5 fights. 10-5 as a pro, born in 1989. But he has the size to negate some of that advantage. How much is Ty Miller used to that? Now, every time Fugit has lost in the UFC, it's been inside the distance. And who did that come to? Michael Morales knocked him out in the 3rd round, knocked him down twice in that fight. Got submitted by Mike Malott at UFC 289, and he got knocked out by Islam Dulatov back at UFC 318. And that guy's 12-1 as a professional. And so that's 3 losses that I don't hold that strongly against a guy like Adam Fugit. He beat Yusaku Kinoshita with a first-round TKO February of 2023 and beat Josh Keelan by split decision. So here, I think if you're believing in the youth, the evolution, the talent of Ty Miller by knockout is minus 130. That's probably where you'll want to go with that, considering Fugit has, when he loses, he tends to get put away. So Ty Miller by knockout minus 130 is not bad. But I do think there is value in a flyer on Adam Fugit plus 355, and Adam Fugit by decision is plus 800. Fugit by knockout is plus 700. That's weird. Fugit by decision is plus 800. Moneyline is plus 355. I think considering that he can match a little bit of the size and length of Ty Miller, it might make Ty Miller, more uncomfortable in this fight, making his UFC debut on this big numbered event that, a lot of people are going to be tuning into Paramount Plus for. So either Ty Miller by knockout minus 130 or a flyer on Adam Fugit plus 355, or even a bigger flyer, Adam Fugit by decision plus 800.
Take care of your underwears. I'm gonna you, man.
Folks, that is all 13 fights. We started over the doozy for 2026 with Connor Bone Slone. That's all 13 fights for UFC 324. Again, this is the last episode that'll be published in association with RotoBaller. The podcast moving forward, the UFC picks episodes, the interlude episodes, those are all going to be independent. They will be on the same YouTube channel, Tap That MMA Podcast. And as soon as I start publishing these independently on Spotify, Apple Music, and Amazon Music, I will post those locations so that you know where to find it. Look out for my MMA DFS Values Picks articles. Comes out Friday morning / afternoon through RotoBaller. Follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady, because we got Zuffa Boxing, we got LFA, we got One, we got I forget what else. Maybe it's tomorrow. That might be it. But Tough Enough is actually starting as we speak. And then next week is when more of those, the rest of the combat sports, or the major combat sports world starts to get going. So we're starting to see more of that action heating up across the globe. Follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady. Follow me on Instagram at RotoBrady MMA. Come on to the RotoBaller MMA Discord on Saturday. Let's talk about what you're up to for UFC 324. Thanks for joining me in the year 2026. Enjoy Paramount Plus. Hope this is promising as we've been led to believe. Enjoy UFC 324. Have a great week and peace.